threshold right now. Not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. Actually, literally, in this precise moment, you are standing at the edge of something that most people spend their entire lives circling without ever stepping through. The question you came here with, whether you know it consciously or not, is the oldest question consciousness has ever asked itself. Not who am I now, not who will I become, but who was I before? Before this body, before this name, before the particular arrangement of circumstances that shaped the person you recognize in the mirror, before the first breath of this life drew you into the story you've been living. Who was your soul before this life? That question is a gate. And the fact that you're here, that this transmission found you, that something in you recognized the title and felt something stir, that is not coincidence. That is frequency matching. That is the gate opening, because you've arrived at the exact vibrational address where it lives. Here is what I need you to understand before we go any further. Most people approach this question as if it's a curiosity, a fun thing to wonder about. Maybe they had a past life reading once, or they watched something interesting about reincarnation, or they've had a dream so vivid and so wrong for this lifetime that it shook them. They approach the question. They look at it from a distance, and then they walk away and go back to the life they already know. That is not what's happening here. What's happening here is a crossing. You came to this transmission because something in you has reached a saturation point, a point where the incomplete picture of who you are in this single lifetime is no longer enough. Something in you is pressing against the boundary of your own story. Something deeper than memory, deeper than personality, deeper than anything you've been taught to call yourself, is pushing forward. And that pressure, that strange, persistent, sometimes aching sense that you are more than what this life has shown you, that is the gate. And today, you learn what's on the other side. Let me tell you something about the nature of thresholds. In quantum mechanics, a system doesn't transition from one state to another gradually. It doesn't slowly drift from particle to wave, from one energy level to another. It crosses. There is a discrete jump, a quantum leap, where the system is entirely in one state, and then it is entirely in another, and there is no in-between, no gradual slope, no comfortable middle ground where you're half in the old state and half in the new one. The crossing is total. The shift is complete. This is how consciousness evolves. Not by accumulating information gradually until you're slightly different than you were before, but by reaching a threshold, a specific vibrational point, where the old configuration can no longer hold, and the new one crystallizes instantly. You cross the gate, and on the other side, you are categorically different from who you were before you stepped through. The question of who your soul was before this life is one of those gates. Because the moment you truly understand it, not intellectually, not as an interesting idea, but in your bones, in your cells, in the part of you that exists beneath language. The moment you genuinely cross this threshold, you stop being a person who is only this lifetime. You become something larger, something that carries its full history, something that understands why it is here, what it came to do, and what it has been doing across the vast arc of its existence. That is the crossing, and we are going to make it together. But first, you need to understand what the gate is made of, because you can't cross a threshold you don't understand. And this particular threshold is built from something most people have been taught to dismiss, to explain away, to file under the category of things that can't be proven and therefore don't matter. So, before we go anywhere, we need to clear that away. We need to look at what the evidence actually says. We need to understand the quantum mechanics of the soul's journey, not as metaphor, but as mechanism, as the actual structure of how consciousness moves through existence. Because here is what I know. The gate is real. And once you understand why it's real, stepping through it becomes not an act of faith, but an act of recognition. So let's begin at the beginning. Or rather, let's begin before the beginning. Before this life, there was something. This is not a spiritual claim. This is not a religious assertion. This is a statement about the nature of consciousness itself, and it is supported by some of the most rigorous scientific inquiry ever conducted into the human mind. Ian Stevenson spent 40 years at the University of Virginia, Division of Perceptual Studies, investigating cases of children who spontaneously recalled previous lives. Not children who were told about past lives. Not children who had been exposed to stories or information that could explain their knowledge. Children, some as young as 2 years old, who began speaking about other lives, other families, other deaths, with a level of specificity and accuracy that could not be explained by any conventional means. Stevenson documented over 3,000 of these cases. He verified them. He traveled to the locations the children described. He found the families they claimed to remember. He confirmed details that the children could not possibly have known through any normal channel of information. 3,000 cases, verified, published in peer-reviewed academic literature by a man who was not a mystic, not a spiritual teacher, but a rigorous, methodical, skeptical scientist who followed the evidence wherever it led. Jim Tucker, who continued Stevenson's work, has added thousands more. Children who remember the names of people they knew in previous lives. Children who describe the manner of their death with accurate detail. Children who have birthmarks corresponding exactly to wounds that killed their previous personality. Children who recognize family members from a life they lived before this one. not by being told, but by demonstrating knowledge that could only come from direct experience. This is the first thing you need to understand as you stand at this gate. The evidence for the continuity of consciousness across lifetimes is not thin. It is not speculative. It is not the province of wishful thinking. It is documented, verified, and reproducible across cultures, across continents, across centuries. The soul's journey does not begin at birth. It does not end at death. It continues. It has been continuing. And whatever your soul was before this life is not lost. It is present in you, encoded in the quantum substrate of your consciousness, waiting to be recognized. Now let's go deeper. Because the question of who your soul was before this life has layers, and each layer is a smaller gate within the larger crossing. The first layer is this. The soul is not a blank slate between lives. This is the part that most people miss. Most people, even those who believe in reincarnation, imagine the process something like this. You live a life. You die. There's some kind of interlude. And then you're born again, essentially starting over, with the slate wiped clean, with only vague karmic residue connecting you to who you were before. Like a computer that gets reformatted between users. The hardware is the same, but the data is gone. That is not what the evidence shows. That is not what the quantum mechanics of consciousness suggests. And that is not what the deepest traditions of human wisdom, from the Tibetan Buddhist understanding of the Bardos, to the Vedic concept of the Atman, to the Platonic doctrine of anamnesis, to the Kabbalistic understanding of Gilgul Neshamot, have ever actually taught. What they teach, what the evidence shows, what the quantum framework reveals, is this. The soul does not arrive at each new life empty. It arrives full. It arrives carrying the accumulated wisdom, the unresolved patterns, the deep preferences, the specific gifts, the particular wounds, and the precise evolutionary agenda of every lifetime it has lived before. Not as memories in the conventional sense, not as a filing cabinet of biographical details, but as frequency, as vibrational signature, as the specific quantum configuration that makes you unmistakably, irreducibly you. Think about this for a moment. Think about the things that have always been true about you. Not the things you learned, not the things you were shaped into by your environment, but the things that were simply there from the beginning. The things you loved before anyone taught you to love them. The things that terrified you before you had any reason for the fear. The skills that came too easily. The knowledge that arrived without study, the sense of recognition when you encountered certain places, certain people, certain ideas, as if you were not discovering them for the first time, but returning to something you already knew. That is not personality. That is not genetics. That is not the result of your particular childhood experiences. That is the soul's prior history, pressing through into this lifetime. That is who you were before this life, making itself known. And here is where the quantum mechanics becomes essential. Because in quantum theory, information is never lost. This is not a metaphor. This is a fundamental principle of physics, the conservation of quantum information. When a quantum system undergoes a transformation, the information that described its previous state is not destroyed. It is encoded in the new state. It persists. It is, in principle, recoverable. The universe keeps its records. Nothing is truly gone. If consciousness is, at its deepest level, a quantum phenomenon, and there is increasing scientific evidence to suggest that it is, from the Orch-OR theory proposed by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, to the growing field of quantum cognition, then the information of who you have been is not lost when you cross the threshold of death and rebirth. It is encoded. It persists. It is present in you right now, in this body, in this lifetime, as the quantum substrate of your consciousness. You are not starting over. You have never started over. You are a continuous stream of consciousness that has been flowing for longer than you can easily imagine, picking up depth and complexity and specific coloring with each lifetime, each crossing, each threshold navigated. And who you are now, the particular flavor of your awareness, the specific nature of your gifts and your struggles, the precise shape of what you love and what you fear, is the accumulated result of that entire journey. This is the gate you're standing at, the gate between understanding yourself as only this lifetime and understanding yourself as the full arc of what you are. If this transmission is reaching you, if this question is alive in you right now, take a second to like this video and subscribe so we can keep crossing these thresholds together. And here is what's on the other side. Clarity. Not the vague, comfortable clarity of a general spiritual belief, but the sharp, specific, actionable clarity of knowing why you are here, knowing what you came to do, knowing why certain things in your life have been so odd, and why certain things have come so easily, knowing why you are drawn to the people you are drawn to, why you have the gifts you have, why the wounds you carry are the exact wounds that needed to be carried into this particular lifetime for the exact evolution that is trying to happen through you. That clarity is what changes everything. That is what's waiting on the other side of this gate. Now, I want to talk about how the soul chooses its life. Because this is the part that most people haven't fully crossed into yet, and it is the part that will shift everything once you do. Before this life began, before you were born into this body, into this family, into this particular configuration of circumstances, your soul chose. This is not a comforting story. This is not something I'm telling you to make you feel better about the difficult things you've experienced. This is the actual mechanics of how incarnation works, as described by every deep tradition that has examined the question, and as increasingly supported by the evidence from children's past life memories, from near-death experience research, from hypnotic regression studies, and from the accounts of those who have touched the between-life state and returned with memory of what they found there. Your soul chose this life. It chose this body. It chose this family, with all of its beauty and all of its dysfunction. It chose this particular time in history, this particular culture, this particular set of circumstances. Not randomly, not arbitrarily, but with extraordinary precision, with a clarity of purpose that the human mind, embedded in the limitations of a single lifetime, can rarely access directly. Why would a soul choose difficulty? Why would a soul choose pain? Why would a soul choose the specific challenges that you have faced in this lifetime? Because the soul is not optimizing for comfort. The soul is optimizing for growth, for evolution, for the precise expansion of consciousness that requires exactly the friction, exactly the pressure, exactly the specific configuration of challenge and gift that your life contains. A diamond is not formed in comfortable conditions. It is formed under pressure so intense that carbon, common, ordinary carbon, transforms into something that refracts light in a way nothing else can. The soul understands this. The between-life state, the state your consciousness occupied before you were born into this lifetime, is a state of extraordinary clarity. A state where the soul can see its own patterns, its own evolutionary trajectory, its own unfinished work with perfect precision. And from that clarity, it chooses. It selects the exact conditions that will create the maximum opportunity for the growth it needs. This is the second layer of the gate, because when you truly cross into this understanding, not just intellectually, but in your lived experience of your own life, everything reframes. The difficult relationship becomes a chosen classroom. The recurring pattern becomes a curriculum. The wound that has followed you from childhood becomes not evidence of your brokenness, but evidence of your soul's extraordinary courage in choosing exactly the experience that would force the growth it needed to make. And here is where it gets even more precise. Because the soul doesn't just choose its circumstances, it chooses its companions. The people who have been most significant in your life, the ones who have loved you most completely, and the ones who have hurt you most deeply, are not accidents. They are not random. They are souls you have traveled with before. Souls you have agreements with. Souls whose evolution is intertwined with yours across multiple lifetimes, across multiple crossings, across the vast collaborative project of consciousness evolving itself through relationship. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition calls these karmic connections. The Vedic tradition speaks of soul families. The Western esoteric traditions speak of soul groups. But across all of these frameworks, the recognition is the same. We do not travel alone. We travel in constellations. We return together. We choose each other, again and again, across lifetimes, playing different roles. Sometimes you are the parent, sometimes the child, sometimes the teacher, sometimes the student, sometimes the lover, sometimes the one who walks away, but always in service of the same deep evolutionary agenda that your souls share. Think about the person in your life who has affected you most profoundly, the one whose presence has been most significant, for better or for worse, the one who has catalyzed the most growth in you, even if that growth came through pain. Can you feel the depth of that connection? Can you feel how it exceeds what this single lifetime would explain? Can you feel the ancient quality of it? The sense that this is not a new connection, but a very, very old one? That feeling is recognition. That is your soul, knowing something that your mind doesn't have full access to yet. That is the quantum information of your shared history, pressing through into conscious awareness. And this brings us to something crucial. Because the question of who your soul was before this life is not just a historical question. It is not just an interesting excavation of the past. It is a living, present, immediately relevant question. Because who your soul was before this life is who your soul is now. The past lives are not separate chapters in a closed book. They are the foundation of the chapter you are currently living. They are present in your gifts, your wounds, your attractions, your aversions, your recurring patterns, your deepest knowing. They are active. They are operational. They are shaping your experience of this lifetime in ways both subtle and profound. And here is the gate that opens when you understand this. You stop being a victim of your patterns, and you start being a navigator of them. Because once you understand that the recurring difficulty in your life is not random, not punishment, not evidence of your inadequacy, but is instead the continuation of an evolutionary thread that your soul has been working on for multiple lifetimes. Once you understand that, you can work with it consciously. You can ask, what is this pattern trying to complete? What did my soul bring this forward to resolve? What is the evolutionary agenda that this particular challenge is in service of? And those questions, those precise, urgent, alive questions, are the mechanism of crossing. They are the way you step through the gate from being lived by your past to living from your full depth. I want to pause here and ask you something directly. Has there been a moment in your own life when you knew, not thought, not hoped, but knew, that you had crossed a point of no return? A moment when everything shifted at once, when the person you were before that instant was simply no longer available to you. Drop that moment in the comments. Not to explain it, just to name it, because naming a threshold is the first act of understanding what it was. Now, I want to tell you about Mira. Mira was 34 years old when she first began to feel what she could only describe as a wrongness. Not a wrongness in her life exactly. Her life, by most external measures, was fine. She had work she was reasonably good at. She had relationships that functioned. She had a life that, if you described it to someone else, would sound perfectly adequate. But Mira had always had the feeling that she was not quite in the right story. The feeling that somewhere beneath the surface of her ordinary days, there was another version of herself, more real, more alive, more fully herself, that she couldn't quite reach. She had had this feeling for as long as she could remember. Even as a small child, she had sometimes looked at her own hands as if they were slightly unfamiliar, as if she was wearing a costume that almost fit but not quite. She had also had the dreams. Not ordinary dreams, she had those too, but a specific category of dream that felt categorically different from the rest. Dreams of a city she had never visited in this lifetime, with a particular quality of light that she recognized the way you recognize a smell from deep childhood. Dreams of speaking a language she did not know when she was awake. Dreams of a child she had held. A child who was not her own child in this life, but who she loved in the dream with a ferocity that left her shaking when she woke. Dreams of a death, not violent, but complete, the way a candle goes out, and the strange peace that followed it. Mira had never told anyone about these dreams. She had filed them under the category of things that couldn't be explained, and therefore were better left alone. But at 34, something shifted. The dreams became more frequent. The feeling of wrongness became more insistent. And she found herself one evening sitting with a question she had been avoiding for decades. Who was I before this? She didn't approach the question with a method. She didn't immediately seek a regression therapist, or a psychic, or a past life reading. She simply sat with the question. She let it be present. She let it breathe. And something interesting happened. The information didn't arrive as a dramatic revelation. It arrived as a series of small recognitions. A memory of the dream city that suddenly connected to a period of history she found herself reading about for no reason she could name. A skill she had always had, a facility with certain kinds of spatial reasoning that suddenly made sense in the context of a craft she had never studied in this lifetime, but that felt, when she encountered it, like coming home, an understanding of a particular kind of grief. The grief of separation from something beloved that had always lived in her chest without explanation, and that now found its context in the story of a life lived before this one. Mira didn't receive a complete biography of her previous life. That is not how this works. What she received was something more useful. She received the thread, the specific evolutionary thread that her soul had been working on across multiple lifetimes, that had brought her to this particular body, this particular family, this particular set of circumstances. She understood, for the first time, why the wrongness feeling had always been there. Not because something was wrong with her life, but because her soul was carrying an unresolved longing from a previous lifetime. A longing for a kind of creative expression that had been interrupted, that had not been completed, and that her soul had returned in this lifetime specifically to fulfill. The wrongness was not a diagnosis. It was a direction. And the moment Mira understood that, the moment she crossed that threshold, everything reoriented. Not because her outer circumstances changed immediately, but because she stopped fighting the pull. She stopped trying to make herself fit into a story that was never quite the right shape, and she started following the thread. She started moving toward what her soul had actually come here to do. That is what crossing this gate does. That is what happens on the other side. You stop fighting the current, and you start swimming with it. And the current, it turns out, has been carrying you toward something specific all along. Now, I want to talk about the mechanics of accessing this, because this is not just a philosophical conversation. This is a practical transmission, and the question you came here with deserves a practical answer. How do you find out who your soul was before this life? The answer is not one method. It is a constellation of approaches, each of which opens a slightly different door into the same room. And I want to walk you through each of them, because different souls access this information through different channels. Your particular channel, the one that is most open, most accessible, most resonant with the specific configuration of your consciousness, is one of these. The first is the method of resonance mapping. This is the practice of systematically cataloging the things that produce in you an inexplicable sense of recognition or belonging. Not things you have learned to love, not things you have been taught to appreciate, but things that hit you in a way that exceeds what this lifetime would explain. Certain historical periods, certain geographical regions, certain crafts, arts, disciplines, certain types of relationship or community, certain spiritual or philosophical frameworks, certain languages. Sometimes you encounter a language you've never studied and feel something stir in you at the sound of it. Something that is not aesthetic appreciation, but something closer to the feeling of hearing your own name spoken in a crowd. These resonances are not random. They are the soul's fingerprints from previous lifetimes, pressing through into this one. They are the quantum information of your prior history, encoded in your present moment responses. And when you map them systematically, when you take the full constellation of your inexplicable resonances and look at them together, a picture begins to emerge. Not a complete biography, but a clear signature. The signature of who your soul has been. Here is how you do this. You create what I call a resonance inventory. You sit with a blank page, or a blank screen, or simply a quiet mind, and you begin to list every historical period that has ever felt strangely familiar, every culture you have been drawn to beyond what your own cultural background would explain, every skill or discipline that came too easily, or that you loved too immediately, every type of person you have always been drawn to, every recurring theme in your dreams that has the quality of memory rather than imagination, every place you have visited and felt, inexplicably, that you were returning rather than arriving, every wound that has seemed too large for this lifetime alone, every gift that has seemed to arrive from somewhere deeper than your personal history. You list all of it, and then you look at it, not with analysis, not with your logical mind trying to construct a narrative, but with the part of you that already knows, the part that has been pressing against the inside of this lifetime, trying to be recognized. You look at it with that part of you, and you let the pattern reveal itself. The pattern will not be neat. It will not be a clean story with a beginning, middle, and end. It will be more like a frequency, a specific vibrational signature that runs through all of the data points and connects them in a way that, once you see it, you cannot unsee. That frequency is the soul's prior identity, pressing through into present recognition. The second method is the practice of threshold dreaming. This is a specific approach to the hypnagogic state, the state between waking and sleeping, that has been used across cultures and across centuries as a doorway to deeper layers of consciousness. The hypnagogic state is a quantum threshold in the truest sense. It is the state in which the ordinary filtering mechanisms of the waking mind relax, in which the boundary between the personal unconscious and the deeper transpersonal layers of consciousness becomes permeable, in which information that is normally inaccessible to waking awareness can surface. Here is the practice. In the evening, when you are genuinely tired but not yet fully asleep, you lie down in a position where you can remain conscious for a few minutes before sleep takes you. And you hold a single question at the center of your awareness. Not a complex question, a simple one. Something like, show me what I need to know about who I have been. Or, let me feel the thread that connects this life to the lives before it. Or simply, who am I before this lifetime? You hold the question lightly, not gripping it, not demanding an answer, but offering it as an invitation. And then you let the hypnagogic state arrive. You let the images come. You let the fragments surface. You do not try to control them or direct them. You simply witness them with the quality of attention you would give to something precious and fragile. In the morning, before you do anything else, you write down whatever you remember. Not just the content, the images, the scenes, the fragments, but the feeling quality, the emotional texture of what arrived, the sense of familiarity or strangeness, the specific details that seemed to carry weight. Over time, over weeks and months of this practice, a pattern emerges. The threshold dreams begin to cohere, the fragments begin to connect, and the picture of who your soul has been begins to clarify. The third method is the practice of body archaeology. This is perhaps the most overlooked of the approaches, and in some ways the most direct, because the body is not just a vehicle for this lifetime. The body is a record. The body carries the imprints of the soul's prior history in its very tissue, in its patterns of tension and ease, in its inexplicable responses to certain stimuli, in the locations of chronic discomfort that have no clear physical origin. The Tibetan tradition speaks of this explicitly. The idea that certain physical marks and tendencies in the current body reflect events and patterns from previous lifetimes. Ian Stevenson's research documented this with extraordinary rigor. Birthmarks corresponding to wounds from previous lives, physical abilities that replicated skills from previous personalities, physiological responses to specific stimuli that could only be explained by prior life experience. The body knows. The body remembers. The body is carrying the record. Body archaeology is the practice of learning to read that record. It begins with a simple inquiry. Where in your body do you carry something that doesn't fully belong to this lifetime? Where is there tension, contraction, chronic sensation that has no clear origin in your current life history? Where does your body respond to certain things, certain types of touch, certain environments, certain sounds, with a disproportionate reaction that exceeds what your current life experience would explain? These are not problems to be fixed. They are data points to be read. They are the body's way of carrying the soul's unprocessed history forward into the present, offering it for recognition and integration. When you bring compassionate, curious attention to these places, not trying to make them go away, but asking them what they are carrying, they often reveal themselves, not in words, not in clear narrative, but in images, in feelings, in a sudden sense of knowing that arrives from somewhere beneath the mind. The fourth method is the most direct and the most challenging. The practice of between-life regression. This is the practice developed and documented by Michael Newton in his decades of work with hypnotic regression. The practice of guiding consciousness back through the death of the previous life and into the between-life state, the state of pure soul awareness that exists between incarnations. Newton's work, documented in his books Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, represents the most detailed and consistent map of the between-life state ever compiled from direct human experience. Thousands of subjects across different cultures, different belief systems, different levels of prior knowledge about the subject, described the same essential architecture of the between-life state with remarkable consistency. What they described was this: after death, consciousness continues. It moves through a process of review, a clear-eyed examination of the life just completed, not as judgment, but as learning. It reunites with the soul group, the constellation of souls it travels with across lifetimes. It engages in a process of planning and choosing, selecting the next incarnation with the guidance of more advanced souls, choosing the specific circumstances, relationships, and challenges that will serve its next stage of evolution. And then it crosses back through the threshold of birth, carrying with it, encoded in its quantum signature, the full accumulated wisdom and evolutionary agenda of everything it has been. Between-life regression is a powerful method because it bypasses the ordinary layers of personal history and accesses the soul's perspective directly. In the between-life state, the soul knows itself completely. It knows its history across lifetimes. It knows the evolutionary agenda it is currently working on. It knows why it chose the circumstances of this life. And in a well-facilitated regression, that knowing becomes accessible to the waking consciousness. This is not a method for everyone. It requires the right facilitator, the right preparation, the right timing. But for those for whom it is the right door, it is the most complete and direct access to the question of who your soul was before this life. Now, I want to take you through a practice, a threshold-crossing visualization that will begin to open the door for you right now, in this moment, regardless of which of the four methods ultimately becomes your primary channel. This is not a passive exercise. This is an actual crossing. So I need you to be present for it. I need you to be willing. I need you to bring the part of you that came here, the part that recognized this question, that felt the stirring when you encountered this transmission. I need you to bring that part of you forward now. Find a position that is comfortable but alert. If you're lying down, you can stay there. If you're sitting, let your spine be long. Let your hands rest open. Let your eyes close if that feels right, or let your gaze soften to a point somewhere in front of you. Take 3 breaths. Real breaths, not performed breathing, but actual, full breathing. Breath that reaches the bottom of your lungs, that expands your belly, that fills you completely. And as you exhale, let something release. Let the surface of this day soften. Let the ordinary concerns of this lifetime become, for a moment, less insistent. Let them recede to the background, like a city seen from a great distance. Still there, still real, but not consuming all of your awareness. You are standing at a threshold. You can feel it. Not as a physical sensation necessarily, but as a quality of the moment, a certain charged quality, a sense of standing at the edge of something. There is a gate in front of you. You cannot see it with your ordinary eyes, but you can feel its presence. You can feel the difference in the air on either side of it. On this side, the side you are standing on now, is the familiar, the known, the single lifetime you have been living. On the other side, just beyond the threshold, is the larger story, the fuller picture, the accumulated history of who you are. The gate is made of light, not the light of this world, not sunlight or lamplight, but a different quality of light, older and deeper, the light that exists in the space between lives. And it is open. It has been waiting for you. It opened the moment you arrived at this question with genuine intention. Begin to move toward it. Not with your body. Your body stays here, comfortable and grounded, but with your awareness, with the part of you that is more than this lifetime. Let that part of you move toward the gate. As you approach, you may begin to feel something. It might be warmth. It might be a sense of expansion, as if you are becoming slightly larger than the boundaries of this particular body and this particular lifetime. It might be emotion, a sense of recognition, or longing, or relief. Whatever arrives, let it be there. Do not try to name it or explain it. Simply let it be present. You are at the gate now. You are standing at the threshold between who you are in this lifetime and who you have been across all of them. And from this position, from this precise vibrational address, you can begin to feel the larger story. Not as a series of images necessarily, not as a biographical narrative, but as a frequency, as a sense of the particular soul that you are, the specific quality of consciousness that has been you across all of its crossings, the unmistakable signature that makes you recognizably yourself, regardless of which body you inhabit, which century you are born into, which culture shapes the surface of your expression. Feel that signature now. Feel the thing that has always been true about you. Beneath this personality, beneath this lifetime's conditioning, beneath everything that has been added to you by circumstance and experience. Feel what was there before any of it. The specific quality of your awareness. The particular way your consciousness moves. The deep preferences and deep gifts that are not this lifetime's achievements, but your soul's accumulated nature. That is who you were before this life. Not a specific character in a historical drama, but this specific quality of consciousness, this particular frequency of awareness, this unmistakable signature of soul. This has been you across all of your lifetimes. This will be you across all of your lifetimes to come. And this is you right now, in this body, in this moment, pressing through the surface of ordinary awareness to be recognized. Stay here for a moment. Let this sink below the level of thought. Let it settle into your cells. Let it become not an idea, but an experience. You are not just a person living a single life. You are a soul on a vast journey, temporarily inhabiting a particular form, in a particular time, for a particular evolutionary purpose. And that soul, the soul that is you, has been doing this for a very long time, has been learning, growing, accumulating wisdom, navigating thresholds, crossing gates, arriving on the other side changed and deepened and more fully itself with each crossing. You have done this before. You have stood at gates before. You have crossed thresholds before. And each time you did, you arrived on the other side more fully yourself than you were when you stepped through. This is another one of those crossings. And you are doing it right now. When you're ready, begin to bring your awareness back to this room, this body, this moment, not leaving behind what you found, bringing it with you, carrying it forward into this lifetime as a new layer of understanding, a new depth of self-recognition, a new clarity about why you are here and who you have always been. Take a breath. Feel the weight of your body. Feel the ground beneath you. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Welcome to the other side. Now let's talk about what changes. Because the crossing is not the end of the journey. The crossing is the beginning of a new way of navigating the journey. And I want to be precise about what actually shifts when you genuinely cross this threshold. When you move from understanding yourself as only this lifetime to understanding yourself as the full arc of what you are. The first thing that changes is your relationship to your own patterns. Every human being has patterns. Recurring themes in their relationships, their struggles, their emotional responses, their ways of being in the world. Before crossing this gate, these patterns are often experienced as problems, as flaws, as evidence of something broken or inadequate. You keep having the same kind of relationship. You keep running into the same kind of obstacle. You keep feeling the same kind of fear or the same kind of longing in contexts that don't fully explain it. And without the context of the soul's prior history, these patterns can seem like indictments, evidence that you are somehow failing at the task of being a healthy, functional human being. On the other side of this gate, the relationship to those patterns transforms completely. Because you understand that the pattern is not a flaw, it is a curriculum. It is the specific evolutionary work that your soul has been doing across this lifetime and the lifetimes before it, and that it has not yet completed. The pattern keeps appearing not because you are broken, but because the soul keeps bringing it forward until it is resolved, until the learning it contains is fully integrated, until the growth it is demanding has actually happened. This understanding doesn't make the pattern immediately disappear, but it changes your relationship to it in a way that makes resolution possible. Because you stop fighting the pattern and start working with it. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this asking me to learn?" You stop trying to escape the curriculum and start engaging with it fully, with the understanding that engaging with it fully is the only way through it. The second thing that changes is your relationship to your gifts. Most people have a complicated relationship with their gifts. They minimize them, or they take them for granted, or they feel vaguely guilty about them, or they don't trust them because they seem to arrive too easily to be earned. There is often a sense that gifts that come naturally don't count, that only things worked for and struggled toward have real value. And this creates a peculiar situation in which the very things your soul has spent multiple lifetimes developing, the things you are most genuinely here to offer, are the things you are least likely to fully claim and use. On the other side of this gate, this changes. Because you understand that your gifts are not accidents. They are not the result of good luck in the genetic lottery or fortunate circumstances in this lifetime. They are the accumulated achievements of your soul across its entire journey. Every lifetime in which your soul worked at a particular craft, developed a particular capacity, deepened a particular way of knowing. All of that work is present in you now, in this lifetime, as natural facility, as the thing you can do that others find difficult, as the knowing that arrives without effort, as the gift that has always been there, waiting to be recognized for what it actually is. When you understand your gifts this way, as your soul's accumulated achievements, as the specific contribution you have been preparing for across multiple lifetimes, you stop minimizing them. You stop apologizing for them. You stop waiting for permission to use them fully. Because you understand that using them fully is not arrogance. It is fulfillment. It is the completion of a very long arc of development. It is the reason your soul chose this particular lifetime, to bring these particular gifts to bear on the particular challenges of this particular moment in history. The third thing that changes is your relationship to your relationships. When you understand that the significant people in your life are souls you have traveled with before, souls with whom you have agreements, souls whose evolution is intertwined with yours, the depth and complexity of those relationships becomes navigable in a new way. The person who challenges you most becomes not just a difficult person, but a soul who agreed to play a specific role in your evolution. The person who loves you most completely becomes not just a fortunate connection, but a soul who has been loving you across multiple lifetimes, whose love for you is deeper and older than this single encounter. The person who hurt you most becomes not just a wound, but a teacher, a soul who agreed at a level of consciousness neither of you has easy access to provide exactly the friction that your soul needed to grow in the way it needed to grow. This does not mean excusing harm. This does not mean remaining in situations that are destructive. The soul's agreements are not contracts that override your well-being in this lifetime. They are evolutionary collaborations that serve growth. And sometimes, the most evolutionary thing you can do is to recognize when a particular collaboration has completed its purpose and release it with love. But the understanding transforms the meaning of the relationship. It transforms the wound into wisdom. It transforms the confusion into clarity. It transforms the experience from something that is simply happening to you into something that is happening for you, for the specific evolutionary purpose your soul came here to accomplish. The fourth thing that changes is your relationship to time. This is the most subtle of the shifts, and in some ways the most profound. Before crossing this gate, time is experienced as a single line, birth to death, beginning to end. Everything that matters must happen within this single span. Every loss is final. Every ending is absolute. Every missed opportunity is irretrievably gone. This relationship to time creates a particular quality of urgency and anxiety, a sense that there is never enough time, that the stakes of every decision are enormous because there is no second chance, that the losses of this lifetime are permanent. On the other side of this gate, time becomes something different, not less real, not less important, but larger. Your current lifetime is not the only time you have. It is the current chapter of a much longer story. The things that were not completed in this lifetime will be carried forward. The relationships that were not fully resolved will be encountered again. The growth that was not fully accomplished will be continued. This is not an excuse for complacency. The soul takes each lifetime seriously, and the evolutionary work of this lifetime matters. But the anxiety of the single lifetime relationship to time softens, because you understand that you are not racing against a final deadline. You are moving through a chapter of a very long book, and the book is not finished. This shift in the relationship to time also changes the relationship to death. Because death, on the other side of this gate, is understood not as an ending, but as a crossing. Not as the termination of the self, but as a transition, a threshold, a gate, from one state to another. The consciousness that is you does not end at death. It crosses. It enters the between-life state. It reviews, it integrates, it chooses, and it returns. The specific configuration of this lifetime, this body, this personality, this particular arrangement of circumstances, that will not continue, but the soul that has been animating it, the consciousness that has been living through it, the evolutionary thread that has been working through it, that continues, that crosses the gate and arrives on the other side, changed and deepened and more fully itself. And this understanding, genuinely crossed into, not just intellectually acknowledged, removes the existential terror that underlies so much of human suffering. Not through denial, not through wishful thinking, but through actual recognition of what you are. You are not a body that has a soul. You are a soul that is currently having a body, and that soul has been navigating thresholds for a very long time. It knows how to cross. Now I want to address something directly, because there are people standing at this gate right now who are feeling resistance. And the resistance is not random. It is specific. It is one of 3 specific forms, and I want to name them, because naming them is the first step to moving through them. The first form of resistance is the rational objection, the voice that says, "I can't know this. There's no proof." This is wishful thinking. This is the mind trying to protect itself from the disorientation of a worldview shift. And I want to acknowledge that this voice is not wrong to ask for evidence. The evidence exists. I pointed to it earlier. Stevenson's 3,000 verified cases, Tucker's continued work, Newton's regression research, the near-death experience literature, the quantum information conservation principle. The evidence is there. The rational objection, when it is willing to actually look at the evidence, tends to soften, not because the evidence is irrefutable in the way that a mathematical proof is irrefutable, but because the weight of it, the sheer volume of it, the consistency of it across cultures and centuries and methodologies, makes dismissal increasingly difficult to sustain honestly. The second form of resistance is the fear of what you'll find. This is subtler and more common. It is the part of you that is not sure it wants to know who it was before. That is afraid of what it might discover. That suspects, perhaps, that the past life story is not a pleasant one. That the soul's history contains things that are difficult to integrate. Violence or failure or loss or complicity in harm. And this fear is understandable. The soul's history is not a curated highlight reel. It contains the full spectrum of human experience, because the soul has needed to navigate the full spectrum of human experience to grow in the ways it has grown. The soul has been, across its lifetimes, both the one who hurt and the one who was hurt, both the one who failed and the one who succeeded, both the one who crossed the threshold and the one who turned back. This is not shameful. This is the nature of a learning journey. The point is not that your soul's history is perfect. The point is that it is yours. And knowing it, even the difficult parts, is more useful than not knowing it. because the difficult parts are precisely where the unfinished work lives. And the unfinished work is what your soul came here to complete. The third form of resistance is the most paradoxical, the fear that it won't be true. The fear that you'll look and find nothing. The fear that there is no prior history, that you are only this lifetime, that the longing for depth and continuity is just wishful thinking, and the emptiness beneath it is the actual truth. This fear is often the deepest one, because it is not just a fear about past lives. It is a fear about the nature of the self, a fear that you are not at your core something lasting and real and continuous, a fear that the thing you experience as yourself is just a temporary arrangement of matter that will dissolve without remainder. To this fear, I want to say something direct. The fear itself is evidence. The longing itself is evidence. Not proof, but evidence, because the longing for continuity, the sense of being more than a single lifetime, the feeling of recognition when you encounter certain things, the dreams that feel like memories, the inexplicable resonances and aversions. These are not random noise in the system. They are signals. They are the soul's prior history pressing through into present awareness. The fact that you feel them is not proof of their content, but it is evidence that there is something there, something pressing through, something that wants to be recognized. And the practice of crossing this gate, of genuinely engaging with the question of who your soul was before this life, is the practice of learning to recognize what is pressing through. Not to construct a story, not to confabulate a past life narrative that makes you feel special or important, but to genuinely listen to what your own consciousness is carrying. To genuinely attend to the signals, to genuinely follow the thread. The thread is there. It has always been there. And you are here, at this gate, because some part of you already knows it. Think about whether there is someone in your life right now who is standing at their own threshold, pressing against the edges of their story, feeling the larger thing pushing back. What would it mean to them to know they are not alone in that feeling? Tell us about them in the comments, or better yet, send them this transmission directly. Your recognition of their threshold is itself a form of crossing. And we will come back to that. Let me tell you about one more thing before we move toward the close of this crossing. I want to talk about what the traditions call the soul's purpose, the specific evolutionary agenda that your soul brought into this lifetime, because this is the most practical dimension of the question we've been exploring, and it is the dimension that most directly affects how you live your life from this point forward. Every soul incarnates with a purpose, not in the vague sense of you are here to be happy or you are here to love, though those are not wrong, but in a specific sense. Your soul brought into this lifetime a particular evolutionary agenda, a particular set of things it came here to learn and to offer, a particular thread it came here to advance. And that agenda is not hidden from you. It is present in the very shape of your life, in the things that call you most deeply, in the recurring themes of your experience, in the gifts you carry and the wounds you've navigated, in the specific intersection of who you are and when and where you were born. The question is not whether your soul has a purpose in this lifetime. It does. The question is whether you are living it, whether you are aligned with it, whether the life you are building corresponds to the evolutionary agenda your soul brought here. And this is where the question of who your soul was before this life becomes immediately, urgently practical. Because the soul's prior history is the context that makes its current purpose legible. The gift you carry in this lifetime is the gift your soul developed across multiple lifetimes. The wound you are navigating in this lifetime is the wound your soul has been working to heal across multiple lifetimes. The specific intersection of gift and wound, the thing you are most uniquely positioned to offer to the world because of both your capacity and your suffering. That intersection is your soul's current purpose. That is what you came here to do. And once you see it, once you genuinely cross the threshold into understanding your soul's prior history and how it has shaped your current purpose, the question of how to live your life becomes dramatically clearer. Not because all the practical decisions become obvious, but because you understand the direction. You understand what you are moving toward. You understand what your life is in service of. And with that understanding, the navigation of the ordinary details, the choices, the relationships, the work, the challenges, becomes possible in a way it wasn't before. This is the deepest gift of crossing this gate. Not the interesting stories of who you might have been in previous lifetimes, but the clarity about who you are now, why you are here, and what you came to do. The past lives are the context. The present life is the purpose. And understanding the context makes the purpose visible. If what you are feeling right now, this thread in your hands, this sense of a larger story becoming legible, if you want to go deeper into the complete mechanics of how frequency, coherence, and threshold crossing actually work together, there is a guide written for exactly this moment. The sealed timeline maps the full 5-phase sequence from diagnosis through collapse, through the crossing itself, all the way to sealed coherence, the state where your field becomes untouchable by frequencies that don't belong in your story. You'll find it in the description below. There is something I want to say to the part of you that has been waiting, the part of you that has felt for a long time that you were more than what this single lifetime has shown you, the part of you that has felt the longing for the larger story, the part of you that has had the inexplicable resonances, the dreams that felt like memories, the sense of recognition in the wrong places, the wound that seemed too large for this lifetime alone, the gift that seemed to arrive from somewhere deeper than your personal history. That part of you was right. You are more than this lifetime. You have always been more than this lifetime. The soul that is you has been navigating existence for a very long time, crossing thresholds, arriving on the other side changed, moving forward, moving deeper, moving toward something that the single lifetime view cannot fully see. And the fact that you are here, the fact that this question found you, that this transmission reached you, that something in you recognized the gate and moved toward it, that is not coincidence. That is the soul's intelligence, operating at a level beneath